how did Judas die? Matthew 27 says he went away and hung himself. But according to Acts chapter 1 verse 18, it said his body fell and burst open. In Matthew 28, it focuses on an angel, but in Luke 24, it talks about two men in dazzling clothing. Who carried the cross of Jesus? In John 19, it said Jesus carried his own cross, but in the Synoptic Gospels, it says Simon of Cyrene was compelled to carry it. So which is it? If the Bible is actually the Word of God, then shouldn't it get its stories right? And today we're going to cover this. Does the Bible contradict itself? First, when we dive into this, we have to first define what contradiction means. And we can look at a law of logic called the law of non-contradiction, which is something cannot be and not be in the same respect at the same time. So before we call a specific passage or verse within the Bible contradictory, we have to ask ourselves three questions. Are they talking about the same thing? Are they talking about something in the same sense? And does one account deny what the other account affirms? And we have to understand different details do not mean things are contradictory. So if I say Misha came to church on Sunday, but someone else says Buddy and Misha came to church on Sunday, that is not a contradiction. It just the first account leaves out more details that the second account adds. And honestly, when people start to have claims that the Bible contradicts itself, I think these apparent contradictions fall into 5 categories. And the first category is kind of the example that I gave with who was there on Sunday, which is selective reporting. And all selective reporting is where someone decides to add a certain detail for a story, and then someone else decides to add or leave out a detail to the same story. And I think the one angel versus two angel in the resurrection account is a perfect example of this. Matthew 28 decides just to focus on the angel that was speaking, and Luke chapter 24 decides to just give in full-on detail of both of the angels that were present. But just because someone was silent in a certain area, it does not mean there is denial. So neither of these accounts negate or don't affirm the other. Matthew 28 just decides to be specific about a specific detail, and Luke 24 decides to add additional information to the same story. The next category is different perspectives, and we see this especially important within the Gospels. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John are not 4 photocopies of the same story. There are 4 different authors presenting Jesus to different audiences, different perspectives, and different details added to their eyewitness account. And really, whenever you have an account, that's what you would expect when you have multiple witnesses to the same event. Let's think of a car crash. If I had interrogated or questioned 4 people that witnessed the same car crash, well, they're going to add or speak about different things that happened. They're not going to give a word for word same account to the story. Some people are going to put an emphasis on the color of the car. Some people are going to put an emphasis on, the car honking before the crash happened. Some people are going to put an emphasis on, the cat that walked out into the street and which made the car swerve, right? Just because there are different emphases, it does not mean that one of them is ultimately lying. The third category is chronological versus thematic arrangement. Ancient biographers didn't necessarily format stories or format reaccountings of things in the same way we do in chronological order today. A lot of times they would format things in the order of topical or even theological. So when people, question again, when they talk about contradictions are in the Bible, and they say, well, Matthew puts this story here, but Luke puts this story here. This doesn't automatically establish one of them got the chronology wrong. The fourth one is different meanings to the same word. Let's look at, I think, one of the most famous ones for this case, Paul versus James. We see Paul says in Romans chapter 3, verse 28, that we are justified by our faith apart from our works. But James says in James chapter 2, verse 24, that we are justified by our works and not by faith alone. So is this a biblical contradiction? But we have to understand that But we have to understand that just because the same word is used, it doesn't mean they're using the same meaning. They're actually talking about two different circumstances. Paul is asking, how is a sinner made right with God? James is asking, what does genuine saving faith looks like? So when we come to this understanding, we see that they aren't opposing or contradicting one another, but they are attacking two different issues or questions. And the last one is harmonizable historical details. So remember that question that we asked with Judas at the beginning of the video. How did Judas actually die? In one portion it says that he died by hanging, and another portion says that his body falls and it bursts open. And the question we should ask ourselves is, do both of these accounts logically exclude one another? And I believe the answer is no. Matthew tells us how Judas died, and Acts adds a connection to that death. So a plausible harmonization here is that Judas did hang himself, and ultimately he did fall, which added the additional bodily injury that Acts talks about. And I think there's even a great thing to even understand here is that a harmonization doesn't have to be proven, but it just has to show us that these things logically can both happen. And sometimes us as Christians, we make unnecessary problems for ourselves because we try to make every account say the same thing. Instead, we should read both passages, establish what the context is, and understand what each author is trying to say. Then we can identify the difference, whether it's just an omission of detail, if it's completely talking about something completely different, a different type of word, if it's a perspective change. Then we can ask if either harmonization is necessary or if both statements cannot logically be true after we have put everything into context. And this is how we actually do proper biblical interpretation. And we can truly see in true genuine intent if something is a contradiction, or if are able to understand what the authors are saying and what is actually being taught. This is how we start to properly defend against this idea that the Bible is filled with contradictions. A lot of times people who are saying this don't really know what they are reading or how they are supposed to read it. They don't understand certain books in the Bible have different genres. Certain accounts are meant to emphasize different events. There are also different perspectives of the same event. And once we understand this, we are more well equipped to answer and attack some of these quote unquote contradictions. This was episode 2 for our Defending the Bible series. In the next episode, we answer some of these hard-hitting quote unquote contradictions and maybe some of the more difficult passages, defending that the Bible is the Word of God, the infallible Word of God, and the ultimate moral standard that we should hold ourselves to.